How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Science of Fantasy Football. Why the Science of Fantasy Football? Well, you combine a meteorologist and a biologist on the show, and they're going to use the scientific method that is guaranteed to make you smarter when it comes to handling statistics, because using the scientific method, we're just simply going to let the statistics guide us to an answer instead of backing up what we already thought by cherry picking those statistics. Don't you just hate when so many people do that when it comes to fantasy football? And joining me as he does each and every week, he is the fantasy professor after all. He is a real professor. Now retired because he was so good at it. They said you don't have to work
Kick me
anymore.
out of there. Yeah.
It is John Bush. And John, Super Bowl is in the books. That means that there's probably going to be some Super Bowl overreaction when it comes to fantasy football for the 2026 season.
I'm sure Seattle's defense will be overdrafted. Not saying you
Oh,
shouldn't draft them, but I do a streaming, and I know you're in on that. I think I had some good weeks last year. Of course, we remember the good and forget the bad. I don't know how many poor weeks. I hadn't had time to grade that. I probably should go back, but and with about 40 leagues, some weeks I drafted the right defense, and I collected on a lot of my leagues because I will usually collect a dollar or two, in fat budget out of 1,000. And so basically paid nothing for them. And I try to stream all year defenses and potentially kickers. So I work on that and have been doing that for a long time. And we got metrics, the defense against position metrics that allows me to do that. And Dennis is privy to that, and we share it on occasion in our matchup discussions. And you can be part of that if you're brand new to us. Welcome. And when we hit next September, we'll go week by week, game by game on some of the key games that we'd like to talk about next year, next season, I guess.
yeah, and the overreactions that I'm talking about from the Super Bowl can be
Mhm.
both positive and negative.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Drake May had an awful game. Okay.
Yes.
Drake May right now is ranked as the number one quarterback, or number two, actually, number two quarterback in dynasty fantasy football.
Hmm.
Okay. In a lot of different people's rankings, but, on on KTC,
Mhm.
keep trade cut, which is kind of the source for a consensus of what's going on. I'm not saying it's the perfect rankings. I'm just saying it's what the
Mhm.
public thinks. He's number two right now, behind only Josh Allen. He had an awful game. And will this affect his ADP in redraft? We'll see. On the flip side of that, we saw Ken Walker the third have the kind of game that people were expecting out of him all year long. And
Yep.
of course, all year long he was splitting carries with, Zach Charbonnet. So we didn't see the volume to support a great season. Now, I didn't have him ranked all that poorly when it came to my statistics that I look at. But he was he wasn't a value where you were getting him in drafts last year, and I'm kind of wondering if this will inflate his value, and of course he could end up somewhere else. I had him ranked 26th with Zach Charbonnet right at 25. They're in the exact same tier, and coincidentally in the same tier with Omarion Hampton, so who's going way earlier in the early best ball drafts. But the key is, how much does him having a great game inflate things? And will his next coach, or if he ends up back on Seattle, will
Mhm.
his current coach split carries again? I
Uh,
would kept him kept him fresh.
Dennis, Charbonnet had a .6, Walker had a .5. So I had them a little bit flipped, and people will forget Charbonnet. So my
Oh,
metrics
yeah.
would pretty much say they're the same. So that pretty much means if they're both on the same team, I expect them to carve each other up and be sad for us.
Yeah.
That's my interpretation right now in February is I'm not reaching for either one yet until I know where both of them are at. If they're on
Yeah.
the same team, then that's sadness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Charbonnet was a 50 with my MVP.
Mhm.
Walker was a 41.2. That's the same. That's there is no difference.
And they'll
And Walker,
carve each other up. I mean,
yeah,
if one goes, then that pushes the other one up.
exactly. But in Charbonnet's situation, they'll probably bring in somebody else to share the duties with him again. And he had an injury late in the season. Is he even ready at the
Right.
beginning of the season? The guy that doesn't seem to be getting a lot of press coming out of the Super Bowl,
Mhm.
and I don't think we'll see his ADP adjust because of the Super Bowl, was their
Mhm.
tight end for Seattle, AJ Barner.
Mhm.
Boy, I liked what I saw at the end of the season
Mhm.
and in the playoffs. Now, he only had a 25 on my MVP, which is pretty low, but
Mhm.
his best 8 games, a 112. that's that's fantastic. So I look at that situation for 2026 season and I'm like, AJ Barner, if he's cheap enough, he's going to be on my radar going ahead.
I
And
have
the other guy,
interest in Barner as well.
oh yeah, yeah. On the flip side of it, for running backs for New England, Ramondre Stevenson and Henderson really didn't do much in the Super Bowl. Stevenson was a 75 with my MVP.
Mhm.
Henderson a 71.4. And their best 8 games, they were an
Mhm.
identical 137 and a half. So
I've
they're
got a .57 and .47 Stevenson over Henderson. So again, the same thing as Charbonnet Walker. They're the same player basically, and they're carving each other up. So again, no reason to jump. I mean, in best ball, Dennis, if right now today, if I was playing, if I grab Charbonnet, I'd love to grab Walker, or I'd grab Stevenson and get Henderson. That's how you'd play both of those. You almost got to have both pieces of the puzzle to feel pretty good about that one pick. You make two picks to one, for weekly value there.
Yeah, and I love that strategy. And last year, in fact, if you had played both of them every week,
Mm-hmm.
figuring one is your
Here's
RB
your,
one,
yep,
and
yep.
one is going to be, or maybe even at their price, they were your RB2 and your flex.
Yeah.
If you look at them, how about this for points? First week 15, that's not great, and I'm looking at combined.
Right.
Second week 19, that's a little better.
Yeah.
The third week, Charbonnet didn't play, so you got 18 from Walker. I'm
Right.
happy with that. The next week, though, they both played. You got 24. I'm not unhappy. Next
Nope.
week, you got 20. I'm not unhappy. The next week, 8 combined. I'm not very pleased
No,
with that.
no.
Then you get 25, 13, which isn't good, 22. This is Walker and Charbonnet now.
Yeah.
22, 26, 19, 21. That's pretty darn good. And then you finish the season with 42, 33, and 35.
Boy,
I'm
they
okay with
really walked it up the last 3 weeks then.
absolutely. And I look at Henderson and Stevenson, you started with 15, then 27, 11, 17. None of those scores are really exciting me. 18, 5, 16, 10. You're not happy with that at all. Then Stevenson goes out. You get 12, 28, 33 from Henderson. because you're leaning into that. You're starting the guy all by himself.
Yeah.
Then you got 13, 22, 40, 19, 35, and 52. I
Wow.
love the way both of those tandems finished the season. And I'm okay with that because at the prices you're probably getting those guys, they are not your RB1.
Nope.
They might be your RB2, or more likely, they're your 3 and 4. At those prices, heck, even I'll take 20 points combined from both of my flexes and smile and be happy most
Right.
weeks. If you're getting 20 or more out of your 2 flex positions in FPPC, you
Right.
probably had a good week. So I look at the Super Bowl overreactions all the time because I think the price will go up on Walker. Price is already sky high on JSN. On the New England side, there are probably going to be some pretty good bargains because
Mhm.
they played so bad. And I'm hoping it drops Drake May a little bit in redraft because right now, my gut says if we were doing a draft right now, he'd be gone before I'd be taking a quarterback. But
Yep.
you cannot overreact to one game, even if that one game is the Super Bowl. And I've started a series of articles now, Professor, where I'm looking at every team and I'm
I
going to be breaking.
saw your template you sent me.
Yes.
Goodness, there's a lot of meat on that bone, Dennis. Are you sure you should be sending those out?
Yeah, I'm not so
I'd,
sure. We need.
I'd, I'd thinly, I mean, these are, we don't know if the listeners are our favorite in-laws or not, you know. Do
We
they
may
deserve
not.
a thick piece of the treat or a thin piece?
Well, we may not share it, but we will share it among ourselves. But
Yeah,
so many changes coming, Professor.
yeah,
How about 10 new coaches? And those are head coaches only.
yeah.
If you look at the number of changes between the head coach and offensive coordinator, whew, boy, we're going to be talking 25 or more changes to those key positions. That's a philosophy, potential philosophy differences with how players are used. And if you look at the quarterback situation last year at this time, when I graded the quarterback situation, I said 21, really sure that the same guy will be back next year.
Right.
Okay. So that was maybe 11 teams where we're going to see a different quarterback situation, but we had rookies being drafted. This year, it looks like one rookie quarterback will be drafted, but there will be at least 7 to 10 on the low side and 10 to 14 on the high side of quarterback changes going into next season. That's a lot of change to try to process.
Change is opportunity, always hurt. Uh, we have to pay attention, but we're going to be left with some uncertainty, Dennis. So in our drafting, you do need to consider that. I just have never done the metrics, to know on average a new head coach, what does that do for a team's average, a position average? There's a lot of questions. I need interns, Dennis. Okay. I need some folks to help me so we can at least have a sense of, in general, what this may or may not mean. But I don't have that information. So unfortunately, you hear it on, people make these proclamations. I don't even know how they make them. Well, this is this. This is a tight end coach, or this is, how do I know? I guess it worked in the last team. This is a new team, Dennis. New people,
Oh,
new
yeah.
lines. I mean, new, conference, maybe even new division. Who knows what's going on?
Well, look at the Chiefs. If you ever want to see how much can change over the course of a 6 to 7 year period, they were throwing the ball all over the yard when Mahomes first started. His best year in touchdown passes was his first year in the league. Had a great second year, as far as fantasy football goes and all that. And then teams started defensing them different. He lost Tyreek Hill and he got better as an offense without Tyreek Hill, with a mismatch of craziness at wide receiver, yet his stats improved. If you look at his passing yards and how successful the team was. And then they got to struggling in their offense, except at the end of the year and in the playoffs. Then they were good again. But their offensive philosophy changed considerably from year one to year seven of Mahomes. So how the heck are you going to figure out some of those tendencies? Because even on the same team, the strength of the defense will even change a fantasy football potential. Last year, great illustration. Arizona Cardinals were awful as a team. Jacoby Brissett, pretty darn good as a starting quarterback in fantasy football, and you got him off of waivers after Kyler Murray went down. Those are the situations you need to look at and say, okay, what has changed? Well, coach, head coach, defensive coordinator, all changed in Arizona. So even if they deal Kyler Murray and Jacoby Brissett is the starting quarterback, I'm not positive we'll see the same results out of Brissett, because I think the team is going to be better on defense next year. They were awful last year. They don't have to get much better to have an impact. Plus, they got a different coach. And they've got a head coach now who is the brother of another head coach. We know what his pedigree was as far as offensive coordinator. He tends to run the ball a little more. Last year, Arizona didn't have James Conner or Trey Benson healthy after 3 games. If both of those guys are back, do they run more? That could affect Jacoby Brissett. There are so many moving parts from one season to the next in fantasy football. But this year, I think there are even more moving parts when it comes to head coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterback changes. That's going to be tough to decipher.
I agree. There is a lot of swirling possibilities. All we can do is in our picking, right? We're looking for bargains. We're looking to play with the coach's strengths if they're really established. Some I don't know. I don't follow coaches enough to know other than what's said, and I don't know how real that discussion is on the radio or in Twitter or X or whatever it is. And I just don't know. So I tend to not put it forward as a big factor. In other words, I don't, if I saw a bargain player, if there was a new coach, I'm not sure I would not draft the player. Maybe you want a little bit more of a price. I mean, we're always weighing the price, and that if you're a good coach whisperer, then I guess you have an advantage over me. I just hope that my consistency and other analysis will balance that up if we're playing in the same league. Maybe you overstate a coach's value, or maybe I understate. One of us will probably turn out better than the other. It's just I don't know how it all works, Dennis. I'm not 100% sure what I could, like I said, I don't have the data. I don't know what it means. I know I did looking at wide receiver ones, switching teams. I did a little bit of that back in the day, and I think the data seemed to imply that there wasn't, on average, notice, on average, a drop off. If they were good on one team, they tended to be good on the other. It doesn't mean they used to be good 2 or 3 seasons ago and got traded. The back class concept, I don't know. I haven't tested that enough to know. How does back class work switching teams? That'd be a good test, wouldn't it? Somebody like a Cooper Cup going to Seattle, it's like, yeah, he has back class, but boy, he didn't really catch fire in Seattle, that kind of thing. So I can think of a negative. It's hard to think of a positive to where a wide receiver had new life, maybe Diggs or somebody. I don't know. Uh, there's a lot of questions and studies to be done in switching in free agency and coaches, Dennis. We need
Yeah,
interns.
yeah, and I don't know if you can ever figure it out because a good coach takes the parts and pieces that he has and then figures out how to use them.
Yes.
A an average coach, I believe, an average coach will have an offensive system and that's what he's going to run, and he's going to hope to acquire the right players to fill that system, and he'll be successful if he can get the players to fit his system. But if he can't, then he's all of a sudden going to have a big downturn. And some of those guys can be very successful. Okay. In college basketball, that was Bobby Knight. He was running the same offense, he was running the same defense. Didn't matter from year to year. He was going to run it, and he was going to run that motion offense, and he was going to bring players into his program that fit what he wanted to run. And on his few bad seasons or average seasons that he had at Indiana, where he didn't live up to the greatness of winning the whole thing, it was because the players he brought in didn't fit the system. He thought they did, they didn't. But a really great coach, like the best of best coaches, and again, I'll use an analogy from college basketball. John Wooden. John Wooden, he'd play through the guards if that was his strength. He'd feed the big guy, and he had a lot of success feeding the big guy over the years, and he had some great big players that he brought in. But he could adapt his system to fit. In football, we're seeing that with Andy Reid. Now, some are saying, oh, last season, Andy just didn't do his job. No, I think the team didn't do their job. And we'll see if he can bounce back and have another great season. But I'm convinced that a great coach will morph his system to fit the players and the type of defense that he sees being played against him. So when a coach goes from one team to another, I don't know if you can always make a great assumption that this is going to be better or worse for a particular player. What it tells me is that it's likely to be different. It might be different in a positive,
Or different than that.
or it might be different in a negative.
Well, Dennis, I think using the opportunity and probability, I expect a coach article from you. I think you might be walking around being Coach Whisper and not know it. I think putting it down, and if it doesn't work out, I mean, I applaud you. You're brave enough to do that. I'm not sure some of your fellow analysts out there would be brave enough to do something they're not, i.e., good at. And of course, they'll be laughed, tarred and feathered and run out of town. Dennis, that's an experiment. Okay, that's what
Yes.
we in science love to do. I love to see you do that. Why? Because I don't have to do it, right? If I can rely on you, then I can focus on my stuff that I share. So we have that synergy that way. That's not something I want to learn is how to grade coaches. But I'm just wondering, Dennis, being up there in the cornfield, what else you got to do is have shuck them corns. You might as well get us some good data, Dennis. I mean, and think about it. When you dry those corn shucks, your wife can beat you over the head with them when you're mad. And I
Ooh.
know, she can do that. So I've seen her, in the Zoom sitting there walking around a big stick. And I said,
Oh, she
"Oh,
does.
Dennis,
She
you're
does
going to get your
thump me from
noggin
the.
hit.
She
Your
thumps me
wife
over
is
the
rough
back of the
and
head
tough on you."
sometimes.
That's
Yeah,
right.
she does.
She gonna
Yeah,
take you to the corn shed and beat you.
yeah. And I would say when it comes to coaches, um, I think I've got a pretty good idea
I know
on
you
what
do, Dennis. You're
on
you're
whether it be plus or
you're so
minus.
quiet. I have to tease out your opinions.
Yeah, I think I can tap into
Why
whether
don't
it's
you
a
do
plus or
that?
minus. And I'll give you one right
Okay.
now that
Okay, right
I'm
now.
looking at because if he's back on the team next year,
Okay.
okay, and that's the first big if.
Right.
AJ Brown.
Yep.
AJ Brown has been a very tough player to forecast. New offensive coordinator, a Daytona 500 tomorrow. I'm speaking in cross references of terms. Offensive coordinator for the Eagles got himself fired last year, right?
Right.
So they'll go in with a new offensive coordinator. So here is the last 4 seasons in MVP for AJ Brown.
Right.
100, 106, 133, and then last year 73. It's the old Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other, right? Well, if he had a 73 and the offensive coordinator is now gone,
Right.
if they bring in a better offensive coordinator, isn't he more likely to play back to that 100 level than go down from 73? Now,
Sure.
he could be gone from the team, in which case then we're looking at the same concept with Devonta Smith. And since we have Devonta Smith and a lot of dynasty teams and our main dynasty team that we share together, I'd be excited about that.
Hmm.
But he's one player that I'm going to be really curious to see where his ADP comes in and to see if he's still with the Eagles
Mhm.
when they go to training camp, because he's a guy that I'm looking at. And this is how I use coach data. I don't profess to say this guy's going to be better or worse than what was there. What I'm saying is there's a change. Now let's look at the pattern of data. And if he went down and now he gets a different coach, because not only did AJ Brown go down, Devonta Smith went down as well. Devonta Smith dropped from a 92 to a 31. AJ Brown from a 133 to a 73. Barkley from a 125 to an 81. And Jalen Hurts from a 107 to a 93. You see a pattern there? Everybody down with an offensive coordinator that was new, and now he's gone. Now, I'm not saying he was the reason that everybody declined, but whatever they were doing last year did not work. They will try something new this year. Will it work? I don't know.
Can you get us team level information and the coach? You see, last 3 or 4 years, look at the WRs and the RBs, and kind of get a feel for what you just showed us as a pattern. If we did an average of that percentage drop, it would be 30, 40%. That's amazing.
Yeah,
I
and
didn't know it was that bad.
and so the problem with that sort of analysis is the old adage of, is this causation or correlation?
Yeah.
Is which which came first?
Yeah.
The bad offensive coordinator, or
Right.
maybe they just had
Yeah.
a bad season because they just won the Super Bowl and the next year they were bound to go down.
Yeah.
I don't know, but a good study would be to say, okay, who are the offensive coordinators eh, that that had good results, and
Mhm.
are there guys that traditionally have good results
Mhm.
when they
I
switch
don't
teams?
know the answer to
I
that.
don't know the answer either, but it's worth taking a look at that as a possible thing to look at. But it'll be a study that'll probably take multiple years to
Oh
do.
yeah, I didn't,
And
we need
so
interns.
we definitely need interns, but I, I'm I'm intrigued enough to say, if there's a pattern there, you might want to chase it. What I really like is when you get a new coach and coordinator coming in that had a good track record.
Right.
Look at the Bears
Right.
with Ben Johnson. Great track record with Detroit, right?
Right.
As offensive coordinator. Everybody on the Bears got better except for one guy,
Yeah.
DJ Moore.
Eh,
So that makes you kind of wonder, okay, everybody got better
except for more. So is
except
that
DJ
bad
Moore.
news for him?
So is what we saw from DJ Moore last year more indicative of what we're going to see going forward? Or is it a case of there are now three mouths to feed in that wide receiver room, not just one?
Mhm.
And that's why DJ Moore went down.
Hmm.
Either way, we know it's not changing next year, right?
Right.
Same guys back running that offense. And now the difference is you've got Swift and Menange are both decent out of the backfield. You got Loveland at tight end, who's going to
Right.
probably get better. You got a Dunze Burden and DJ Moore.
Yep.
Ooh, that's a lot of mouths to feed in that passing game.
I agree.
Are they going to throw the ball enough that any one of those guys is going to be really, really strong with their numbers? I'm not sure. But the answer is probably they're going to split the touches. I mean, we're looking at a Dunze Burden and DJ Moore, who were all drafted in the top 39 picks when they
Yeah.
came out.
Right.
And you had Loveland, that's another guy. Ed Swift, that's another guy. So you got five guys that were drafted in the first 40 picks in the draft.
Right.
That's that's first round and the first third of the second. That's pretty high draft capital.
Right.
So you've got a lot of talent. Maybe you don't have the opportunity for any one guy to dominate. That's kind of how I look at the team level data
Yeah.
to
Which
get an
is
idea where
something
we're
I'm
going.
interested in, definitely. I
So
may do
I'll be,
that with my com data. Look at the team level com data.
yes, I think it's very important to see, because I think there might be a limit to the upside
Mhm.
that you can have with guys. Now, that doesn't mean that offense isn't going to be great,
Mhm.
but maybe Swift and Menanjai and Caleb Williams are the guys you want to own at price,
Mhm.
and not Loveland, Adunze, Burden, and more.
Right.
We
Yeah.
don't know what
What
the
pieces work?
yes,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yes. But these are the kinds of things
What's a good
that
study?
I'm looking at here in the off season to get an idea, and I'll be breaking down team by team. I'm not sure if we're going to share that with anybody but ourselves yet,
Oh, that's
but
that's a lot of stuff, Dennis.
but we are breaking down every team because that'll
I
go
don't
in.
know. That's not me saying, if you want to share, because look, a second goal is we got to make you world famous so you can go ESPN and people will hire you so we can get their databases and
Well,
interns. See, you
that's
got
the
to be our
secret.
stalking horse for you to get out there and run a good race to get everybody woken up there.
Well, we might want to share the data then. You just never know. I'm just not sure I want to work that hard. I want the
Dennis,
interns to do all the
that
work.
was a hell of a deal that you did.
Hey, if we can get the interns, we're doing well.
Yeah, I
That's what
agree.
we need to do.
Do we want to me to chew on this piece of data, or I mean this Twitter, or should we just shut the show down now?
No,
And okay, you
we
want
need
me
to,
to rah
yes,
rah this? Okay,
yes, bring this up.
okay. Let me. Uh, okay, let's see where you. Okay, so I have this. I'm going to flip
So
it.
I love when people make these definitive 100% statements when it
Well,
comes to fantasy
yeah.
football.
Just to let you know, I am a subscriber to Fantasy Pros.
And I think they have a great site. They have a
They have a great
fabulous
site,
website.
and
Fabulous.
I love their playbook because if you have 40 teams like me, it sure
Oh,
cuts
yeah.
my time down to find free agents and whatnot. With that said, they tweeted, and I'm going to just read the statement and then I'm going to stop and chew on it a little bit, Dennis. So the first statement was most fantasy players lose their edge every draft season by relying on gut feel or one, i.e., one analyst hot take. So when I see that sentence, what does that mean, edge? Players lose their edge. Does that mean most fantasy players have an edge? If so, how much is that edge? Does that make my job harder to beat them? So that is just kind of a little bit smoky there because I don't know what that means, what their definition of edge is. And so they're warning you. What they're trying to do is say you should hang and subscribe to Fantasy Pros. I mean, that's the bottom line. I know what they're trying to
Yes.
do. That's a funny way to do it. Uh, so gut feel or analyst hot take. So I'm not sure their definition of gut feel. I don't know what that means. Or one analyst's hot take. I will make a comment. Dennis and I having somebody else to chew on is helpful, but you've got to be, the personalities have to mesh. You cannot be
Yes.
ashamed to throw out silly stuff because you can, and you just you got to be honest and you got to let it flow, or at least be diplomatic because people can get prickly. So you better make sure you've got multiple people if you're sharing discussions. Dennis and I do that all the time. And I don't know if Dennis can think back, but a lot of times, Dennis, when you ask me a question, I actually respond by a series of questions that I always have in these decisions, right? Do you need lots of points? Do you need
Yep.
safety? To me, that is a decision tree. And by the way, Dennis really loves that decision tree thinking. I agree 110%. I've always used that as well. But having two people at least allows you to have a decent decision tree discussion. And again, folks, I'll just cut to the chase. I asked the question, do we need that upside? And my definition of upside is way above median, probably double median. Okay, so if the median is 10 points, I'm talking, do you need 20? Or can you be happy with 8? In other words, a safe play. Where are you finding yourselves at? Because if Dennis says I need some safety, that that puts me different than if he needs that upside. And so I agree with Fantasy Pros that the one analyst, but I don't know what their hot take definition is. So right away, we had a discussion in many shows about definitions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you could go and look at that, but long story short, people they don't know what edge, they don't know what gut feel, they don't know what hot take is. And I don't even know if they know what the word analyst really means in fantasy football. Okay.
Yes.
So what they're trying to scare you, and this is not how I would do the advertising for fan. I know what I would do, and I'd write up something as a professor, but hey, there ain't no money in my pocket, so I'm gonna let Fantasy Pro. I don't know who hired this guy for Fantasy Pro, this girl, but they didn't hire me. I'll do it different. So that's the first statement, Dennis. So you have any comments before we go to the next statement? Two statements is action packed, but we're starting off slow, so they're already souring my broth.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem with a lot of these big statement, these definitive statements like this is how can it be definitive if you don't define the terms? And I, from what you read so far, I agree you shouldn't let one piece of data change
Yes,
your mind. So I'm all in on my MVP index. Okay. I understand that this is a good piece of data, but I would
we've
never,
tested it. I've
we've
tested it
tested it.
for you, and I
We,
know your strengths, quarterbacks and running backs. And we
yes,
do need to update that. That was 2 or 3
absolutely.
years ago.
Yes,
But I knew that it was holding data. I'm doing predictiveness with my com data, year 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, kind of a career arc on top of that.
yes. And I'm
And
I'm doing a similar study when it comes to my MVP so I can understand how to forecast the future, not just,
yes,
okay, he was an 85 the first 2 years. The data says that he's more likely to be
whatever.
at this level year 3.
Yeah.
That's valuable. But what if I can get good enough at forecasting the change where I can narrow that range of where I expect the player to be next
Mhm.
year? And, I want to get to a point where only injury is the only thing that can upset the apple cart. When we get there, then I'll feel good about it. What I will say about their comment is the noise that is the fantasy football consensus out there
Mhm.
can alter your strategies. Even experienced people like us, we can let the noise affect how we draft a team.
Yeah.
And that is most of the time that happens to me, it's a bad team or a
Gotcha.
worse team that I end up with because our data isn't single source.
No.
Our data looks at a lot of different ways
And
of
years of
looking.
data and heavy data, a lot of
Yes.
data points over years. And we use statistical analysis to test it. Okay, it's not just
Yes.
so whatever a gut feeling means. To me, gut feeling means you're not really using stats. You're using visual, what you saw last week or what you saw last year, and you're not
Yes.
really applying any data and probabilities and floor ceiling concepts. That's what I think you need.
And it's sometimes, I'm going to read into it because I think sometimes the gut feeling
Yeah.
is this I got to have this guy. For whatever reason, people fall in love with a particular player. Whenever you hear the professor and I talking about a draft,
Yeah.
we never talk about a single player. So we don't say, "Oh, I'm leaving every draft with James Cook."
No, I
Okay,
usually don't say that.
we
Rarely.
have we have groups of players that we find acceptable at each point in the draft.
Yes.
And we usually have 2 to 4 at each position that are worth consideration. Now,
Yes.
early, first round, first 3 rounds, quarterback probably isn't even on my radar yet. Tight end might be, but quarterback isn't. And so each round, successive round, I might have 2 to 4 quarterbacks, 2 to 4 running backs, 2 to 4 wide receivers, and maybe 1 to 3 tight ends that I think make sense at that pick. They're at least players I'm going to consider, which is why we prefer longer clocks than 30 seconds, because I want to think through the process, and I want to use my decision tree. And I want to then think forward. If I take a running back, what does that mean for my next pick? Where am I now? Oh, I've got 3 running backs and it's only the 5th round. Okay, then maybe I'm not looking running back in round 6 because I got 3 already. I got maybe 1 tight end, 1 wide receiver, 3 running backs through the first 5 rounds. I'm probably looking other than running back. Now, if the running back is the only guy that makes sense at the next pick, I'm taking a 4th one, and I'm okay with that because I got 4 starters that I can play from the running back position every week in FPPC with 2 guys at the flex. But I don't like to make snap decisions in drafts. That's why I prefer the long clocks.
Yeah. Couple things. I do have videos discussing some of this stuff we will get into here in a second. I just want to circle back since most fantasy players lose their edge. What they're doing, Dennis, and I've seen this at the racetrack, is you get these pet betters that think that the jockeys and the trainers are all pulling tricks. And it's like, damn it, I know I'm smart, but everything keeps getting in my way and they're pulling tricks and those jockeys are thieving me out of my $2 bet. And they're just convinced that it's just one big circus and one big kabuki show and it's all rigged against them. They don't think, hold it now, somebody else must have bet on the winner. Are they in on it? I mean, that just leaves you paranoid. But I don't think most fantasy players have an edge the way I would define. Folks, no offense. I don't think unless you can show year in and year out, you can make money. I don't think you have an edge. I have no evidence to that statement. But again, Fantasy Pros want you to subscribe so you can get that edge. They're trying to use this idea that it's being you're because you're not adequate, you're losing your edge. I don't. That's not how I would say that or approach that. Okay, the next sentences, Dennis, really get me cranky. So this leaves you exposed to bias and blind spots, especially in redrafts, where values shift fast. So definition, what's bias? Is it cognitive bias? I've got video lessons on how to deal with cognitive biases. Been thinking about that for 10 years. Every year I read up on dealing with cognitive biases because we can be tricked. I agree,
Oh, yeah.
but I don't know what that means by bias. It means that basically if you don't listen to Fantasy Pros, that you're just a victim of your own bias. And I don't know what the word blind spot means. I understand you don't know where the minefield is, but you could be standing on it. But again, I had a lesson or two just to think about that. But again, the definition of what they think bias is and why that occurs, I would argue you could subscribe to Fantasy Pros and still have extreme cognitive bias. What I didn't understand was the words where values, whatever value means, shift. What does that mean? Up or down? Fast. What does that mean fast? Inside a draft? Every week it gets faster? I don't even know what that means, that sentence. It sounds like, again, this idea that things are moving and you're the big dummy, that you have no clue what all that is, and you better subscribe to us because you're a big dummy and you don't know anything. I mean, this is kind of insulting, but I have no clue what that means. Value shift. I don't remember. Uh, I don't expect Bijan Robinson's value to shift fast, Dennis. I pretty
No.
much now there are players that I could see, and again, what does that mean shift? Like half a round up or down? Okay. But what's the normal shift in any player, up or down? I understand there are those at the bottom of the draft that in preseason and things can really, they can move up multiple rounds. That's usually not in the first five, six, seven. I don't know the data exactly, but my experience and my recall, which can be faulty, I do have bias, is not as dramatic as players that are unknown and people don't know and people shift up. I mean, uh, every fab bet every week we see players that are on the side all of a sudden, well, he'll take over, and everybody rushes to that window and bets at the $100 window that that's the truth. So I don't know what value shifting. And then here's Dennis, this gets me cranky reading it more. Meanwhile, your competition, i.e., your pros subscribers that you're in the league with, is stacking. Don't know what stacking means. Expert data against you, isn't it? Expert analysis, because the data is really not. I mean, I tease you. It's not data. It's your analysis of the data. Your data
Yes.
doesn't stack things against you or not. It's data. Data. So I don't know. It again, it sounds like, boy, you better get with Fantasy Pros. Well, if everybody is playing with Fantasy Pros in your league, then it's worth nothing because everybody's doing it. If everybody's using the same cheat sheet, that's not much of a cheat sheet, is it? The trick is what Dennis and I do. We look at things different. We have secret stuff. We do lots of research. We go through and constantly change our methods and try to make more money all the time. And I know this is not built for you or I, Dennis. But Fantasy Pros, you got to do a better job at this. I would be glad with a little bit of sweetness here, like a free subscription here. I'd be glad to give the professor's opinion about some of this stuff here. I can do as good as this. I can make even people more salivate. Yeah, you're just a big dummy, like Fred Sampras used to call them on. You're a big dummy. You're a big dummy if you're not with Fantasy Pros. Okay. So anyway, I'm sure I can make it funny too. But Dennis, I don't know, shifting values, biases, blind spots, and stacking expert data. Again, it's like it sounds illegal. It's like they cheat me out of my $2 show bet. I know those jockeys are doing that. It sounds just like I've heard people at the track that, well, they're against me today. It's like, what are you talking about? But Dennis, you met those,
Oh
those
yeah.
jockeys see me betting and they say, we go fix so and so over there. See him? He's jumping up and down with that ticket in his hand. We go fix his ass. I'm gonna put the hold on my horse and ease him out. And there goes your $2 show bet out the door. Make Granny mad, lose her dentures at the bad bet.
Yeah, and meanwhile, the jockey who stiffed that horse
Yeah.
in a $50,000 race
Yeah, he's going
is
to forego his money.
is
Yeah, let
turning.
me fix this $2 better. I want to make
Yeah.
sure he never comes to the track again.
Oh my goodness. So a couple of things to unpack in this that I absolutely 100% agree with. There's always change from week to week, and the more you can stay up with that
Well, what
change,
is the value, Dennis?
well, the values are always changing,
Yeah, but
Professor.
what is Dennis's value?
Well, a
You
player's
see what I'm saying?
value,
A player,
correct.
if you draft at X, they return Y in end of the year consistency or whatever, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that
but it but it
a defined
varies.
value?
Yeah, it varies with player, and here's
Well,
the thing
sure.
is we often don't know until after we see the pattern develop, and sometimes it takes weeks to see the pattern. By then it's too late.
Yeah.
So so here's what I will say about anybody in the fantasy football space. There is not one expert or one group of experts that is always going to be correct. There isn't. Because I could tell you this, if they were, they wouldn't be sharing this data with anybody because they'd make so much money off of it that they wouldn't want to share any information. What Professor and I are doing with our podcasts is trying to teach people how to play the game in a better way and how they can understand the data themselves, in addition to getting some info from some of the good people in the business. And Fantasy Pros, they're one of the best sites out there.
I subscribe to.
But are they better than Football Guys?
Mm,
Are they better than TSA
mm.
as far as having better experts? I don't know if we can grade them because even the way the fantasy football industry grades themselves is, I think, faulty. Because in weather forecasting, for instance, if I'm forecasting for the right city where the weather isn't very volatile, I can maybe have a 99% accuracy rate. And if somebody else is forecasting for a more volatile weather city, they might only hit on 86% of their forecasts. That doesn't mean that the 86% guy is dumber as a weather forecaster than the 99. But if you look at the skill scores when there was actual weather, and now you grade their percentage of hits and misses, you'll have a much better idea of who the better weather forecaster is. Same thing in fantasy football. So in fantasy football, on a weekly basis, there are a lot of mistakes that are made. There are a lot of guys that are, oh, this is my guy for DFS lineups, and he goes out and he scores 3 points. That's the volatility from week to week that is sometimes hard to capture. But in redraft fantasy football, we just want the best bets for the entire season and the best bets for a partial of the season. And by that, I mean, yes, Bijan Robinson is one of the safest running backs that we could pick this year because we know he's not going to show a lot of volatility from one week to the next. And he's going to post some really big weeks as well. Those are the two things you want in fantasy football. That's what our statistics show. Is they give us a clue on who the less volatile players will be. The quote unquote safer players that are guys you can count on more weeks than not. That's That's the whole idea behind your comm data. How many good weeks did he give you?
Yep.
The guy that gave you 15 good weeks versus the guy that gave you 3, it's pretty easy to figure out. So I agree that fantasy football's the value of a player is always changing. Even a player as great as Bijan Robinson, with Penix at quarterback, MVP of a 155.5. That's insanely great. With Cousins, a 122.2, still elite, but 30 points less. That's 20% less of a player value with a change of quarterbacks. And if you would have asked me, I would probably said he might have done better with Cousins. Until I broke the data down, I didn't know. Kyle Pitts, MVP of only 25 with Penix, 62.5 with Cousins. So 2 different players, 2 different results with 2 different quarterbacks. And when the quarterback change happened, I'm not sure you would have been right about which was going to be better, which was going to be worse. Because here's the thing, it wasn't just a passing thing. It wasn't a passing ability. It wasn't the passing game being better. Because Drake London had a 122.2 at Penix and a 50 with Cousins. Absolutely the reverse of what Pitts did. So what conclusions can we make? A different quarterback, different results for different players. But if you would have asked the experts at Fantasy Pros to predict that ahead of time, I'm not sure they would have gotten right any more than you or I would have gotten that right. But what we knew was Bijan Robinson, even though he was less great with Kirk Cousins, he was still great. That's what we're able to infer from this data, that he's a safe player because he did a great thing. He had a great level of performance with 2 very different quarterbacks, and 2 other players on his same team flip-flopped their performance. I wouldn't have predicted that ahead of time, necessarily. So that's the value is always changing for players, but we often don't know what that value change is until it's too late. Just like at the horse race track. I get a change of jockey from a guy who wins 3% of his races, and all of a sudden I've got Irad Ortiz Jr. on that mount.
Yep.
I expect the horse to do better, right?
Yes.
Now, he stumbles out of the gate. He was supposed to be a front runner, but for whatever reason, he's late leaving the post. Does it matter whether he's got a 3% or a 25% jockey on him? No.
Nope.
So this is what happens in fantasy football. Guys stumble out of the gate. We can't predict that unless they have a history of stumbling out of the gate. If we knew that quarterback A did this to this player, and now quarterback A is back again, I'm feeling better about that prediction. But sometimes in fantasy football, you're making educated guesses. And to suggest that one site is going to be right all the time and give you an edge, I think we get more of an edge from our data because we combine data sources. We combine metrics. I'm not sure other people are doing that. And I think that gives us a little quote unquote edge. And by edge, I mean it probably gives us a few percent advantage against the consensus. And that's what you have to do in fantasy football. But here's the rub on all of it. The bigger the website, the more popular the website, the more it moves consensus. So if their results, if their expert rankings are closer to the ADP, I'm not sure that's giving you an edge in drafts. But on a weekly basis, if they know more about what's going on with injuries, what's going on, how an offensive line change, how losing two linemen, how is that going to affect? They're probably smarter at fantasy pros of knowing how good that backup right guard is than I am. And I'll use that input. But on other things, I'm not convinced that some of the best analysts in the business are any better. They're just making a lot more noise. And that's great. I'm not disparaging them for making the noise, but do not ever let one person, one piece of data totally change your mind, because there are no 100% in fantasy football.
My last comment about that, I know we're going long. Depends on how you define success. To me, it's
Yes.
making money.
Yes.
And at the racetrack, you can pick 30% winners and still lose money.
Lose money. Yes.
Yeah. So eh, how they grade, it's just a piece, but I have to put it all together. I have to read the information. I have to be the analyst for my team. And there are probably things that are not captured in metrics that I do well.
Yes.
And, there's, just things that who I am and what I've been trained to do as a biologist. And to me, the bottom line is who makes money. And I know places like Scott Fishbowl and whatnot give you that, but that's not real either, because the leagues I play in are 11 other people. So to me, the draft night out concept is a lot more real. They are to publish who wins every year, and your record there is a little bit more than, oh, I was 500th out of, 10,000. I mean, that sounds good, but did you still make any money? I mean, I don't know. That's a slippery slope, and that's just not something I want to focus on. I want to focus on my game. And so that's what I'm doing. And then I want Dennis to focus on his, and then I get to share his secret stuff. And that helps me win more money. And I like that. So I invite anybody who's a data person, if they want to jump in with us and intern or whatever, I suspect we will up your game. Okay, because we'll be doing different. Doesn't mean you're not sharper at whatever. You may be the tight end whisperer that Dennis and I need. That'd be great. But I bet you that just our holistic view, our entire repertoire will be something that people could take advantage of. And I would love for some sharp folks to work with us. But right now, it's just Dennis and I. Still waiting for some other Dennis clones here. He looks like a clone in that picture. His wife beat him over the head, beat the hair off his head on that picture there with his 10 cups of coffee.
And what I will say, my final comment on this whole situation is, I think a great test, an absolute great test, would be this blind scientific test of taking 12 people, trying to find 12 people that are equally smart or equally ignorant to fantasy football, give them the same cheat sheet to use, but then teach a few of them smarter draft theory and roster management. And I will say this for the record: we spend so much time ranking the top 25 players in fantasy football. Everybody does it. Everybody sends those lists out. Everybody updates them damn near every day, it seems like.
Yeah.
We don't spend enough time talking about strategy, talking about how to put the odds of the game in your favor. And when Professor and I are looking at the data, we break it down and we look at it from multiple different ways. And we start looking for those red flags. And we avoid the red flags early, lean into the uncertainty late. That strategy, if I were to say, if somebody asked me, why have you become more successful in playing these games? It's more game theory than being perfect on forecasts. All you need to do on a forecast for player A is to know, do I feel better or worse than consensus on this player? Consensus is defined as our ADP.
Yep.
Consensus can be different if I'm playing at ESPN versus Yahoo versus FPPC. The rules of the game are different. The ability of the players are different. But the ADP defines the consensus at any website you're playing at. And all you got to do is beat consensus more often than the other guys in your league. And the professor and I have proven over the years that's not as hard as it seems. And the reason that we have successes in the game every year and failures every year, we play enough leagues that the advantages that we can put into play of our player knowledge and strategy can offset the bad luck. Because in fantasy football, you're going to get some good luck as well. But if your roster management and style and drafting, all of the things that go into building your team, if they minimize how bad luck can hurt you and maximize how good luck can benefit you, you're going to be more successful in this game.
I agree.
So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. Hey, if you like this discussion, you'll love a lot of the professor's videos because he drills down in a lot of different topics in fantasy football. Head on over to the sportsaffiliation.com as well. Like and subscribe to their YouTube page. Watch and enjoy the data lab over there each and every week during the off season, and come on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.